Every couple of years or so, we have a show that comes on or a movie that's released in which the main star of the show isn't actually what ends up being the thing that everybody talks about. Every once in a while, we have a character in a TV show or a movie or a book, any kind of medium like that that tells a story that the people who created it want you to pay attention to the main character, but they don't actually have a main character that's worth paying attention to. And what ends up happening is the fan base ends up actually latching onto a secondary character, one that is better developed, has better motivations, has a lot more character, personality that the audience relates to, and so on and so forth. And that is precisely what has happened to the brand new Disney Plus production, Loki. I remember in the early phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe when Loki and Thor went hand in hand in every single Thor movie. And honestly, the first two Thor movies were not very good. I don't think it's a very controversial take in saying that the first two Thor movies didn't suck. Nothing Marvel's done so far, save maybe Captain Marvel, has really sucked as a product. But I think it's definitely reasonable to say that Thor and Thor 2 were not the same kind of tracks and feel that Marvel had put out in a lot of recent movies before that. Since Thor 1 was a part of Phase 1, you look at Iron Man, you look at Captain America, Thor didn't really give you that same kind of vibe. It was slick, new, sexy, a lot of the adjectives that you would use to describe a lot of other Disney products at the time, but it wasn't really compelling. It wasn't really funny. It didn't really have the kind of personality and humor. It didn't have the back and forth banter. It didn't really have the relationship with the audience that Iron Man and Captain America had really established. It was kind of a really weird standalone from the rest of the series, and it wasn't really until Thor Ragnarok that Thor figured out how to Marvel correctly. Which is actually really unfortunate because Chris Hemsworth is a phenomenal actor, and he's really good at playing a character like Thor that's very big, booming, Norwegian-esque, but also has a lot of personality to him and also sort of a brooding main character kind of vibe. There was, however, one character that we did like, and that was Loki. Marvel and Disney fans everywhere loved Loki's sense of humor. They loved his snideness. They loved his cunning. They loved the fact that they could never trust him to do what was right, and so they really were kept on edge by a lot of the things that they thought he was or was not doing. And the best part about Loki was the fact that he was the easiest to relate to in terms of characters in the entire MCU. He was talented. He was extremely cunning. He was very smart. But there were a lot of things that it was hard for him to learn from. He had a lot of personality quirks, a lot of inner desires that he couldn't reconcile with the calling of being a prince of Asgard. And that was something that everybody related to. People who want to do good, they think they're doing the right thing, and then they end up falling short because they have selfish desires. So it wasn't a surprise when Tom Hiddleston became the hottest new thing on the internet, basically everywhere. And in this new series, Disney has found the perfect way and medium to express Loki's character and develop him in a way that's constructive and will allow him to grow without becoming really tiring and boring to the rest of the community, like some of the other things that Disney's done in the past. Like usual, let's start on a positive note and let's talk about the things that Loki does extremely well. It should come really as no surprise in this series that Marvel is extremely good at doing the back and forth banter. And Loki, specifically his character, is extremely well adapted to make that an essential part of his interactions with the people around him.
Are you taking me somewhere to kill me?
No, that's where you just were. I'm taking you someplace to talk.
Well, I don't like to talk.
But you do like to lie, which you just did. Because we both know you love to talk. Talky.
How long have you been here?
I don't know, it's hard to say. You know, time passes differently here in the TVA.
What does that mean?
You'll catch up.
Tom Hiddleston is hilarious. He's an extremely good actor, and he works really well with Owen Wilson's character, Morbius. The banter fits their characters. They don't go outside of themselves in order to barb each other for the sake of the audience, so it doesn't get super irritating, and it's also extremely well timed. It doesn't drag on to make it really tiresome and boring or make it sort of an aggravating portion of the show. You actually really enjoy when they go back and forth because you know at any time it can start and it can stop, and it's still really entertaining. It keeps it extremely fresh. Also, to this point in the series, it's extremely well paced. There's not moments in the episode that you find yourself extremely bored. Mostly because Disney is doing a very good job at the moment with their TV shows of not giving you too much information. There's not too much for you to sit on and get antsy and wait for the next thing to come because you never get anything, and so all you're doing is you're starving for morsels of the story, morsels of the plot, and Disney will slide them to you in a really consistent way that helps you really crave in a way that's productive, but it doesn't leave you sitting there bored waiting for the next thing to happen. Also, Loki is extremely entertaining visually. It doesn't have too many breaks in terms of CGI, and it also doesn't rely on CGI too heavily to the point where it feels like the actual people who are there are not supposed to be there. They don't look out of place. Everything is extremely well done, which we've come to expect from Marvel. They're extremely good at CGI when it comes to pretty much every single thing they've done except the Black Panther movie. Also, while we've seen Loki have human moments, or human probably isn't the right word, but emotional moments in the past, where he's reflected on the consequences of the things that he's done, where he reflects on what it is that he wants and if it matters, if it weighs correctly according to the things he has to do to get there. We've had those moments in the past, but in this show, it's a consistent thing. You start to see a lot more of the projection that Loki gives off of trying to appear great and powerful to everybody around him, but in reality you understand that he is an individual. He is a person. He has thoughts, he has feelings, he has hopes, he has fears. He feels much more relatable, even more so than he did in the Thor movies, because you begin to understand that his entire life has shaped him to be this way. You understand why it is that Loki is the way that he is. There's a lot of problems sometimes in prior movies, Disney and without Disney, where people just are the way they are, and the movie kind of bases itself and its plot off of that, and it doesn't really go through showing how people became that way. For example, talking about Thor, in the first movie, Thor is Thor, and it doesn't really explain why it is he is that way or how he became that way. He's just arrogant. He just sucks, and that's just pretty much the movie. Thor 2 and 3 are a little bit better in terms of development. Thor 2 is definitely not better than Thor 1. But in terms of development of Thor's character, it makes more sense because you've seen him actually go through things. You actually understand how he got to where he is from point A to point B, and it makes more sense, and it makes you root for him. It makes him a lot more relatable. And Loki's doing the same thing with Tom Hiddleston's character, where they move from thing to thing, but you see the progression, you understand why he feels the way he does, and why he does the things the way he does, why it is that he acts out. And like I said, I really like it. I think that Disney Plus has made a really good addition by bringing Loki in, because I think a lot of the stuff that Disney Plus was doing was starting to get a little bit stale. And so I think it's really good that they added this. It's really well timed. The problem is that Loki undermines everything that Marvel has done since the inception of Iron Man and built to now. Like, everything no longer matters. And I'm sure there are going to be people in the comments who are going to say, well, Jackson, why is it that you didn't read the comics? The comics explain this, and it would make a lot more sense, and you wouldn't dislike. I don't dislike the show, and I'm not going to put you down for reading the comic books. Read the comic books if you like them. I'm looking at this piece of work, Loki, the TV show, by itself, with objectivity, not including all the other things that are going to try and corral it and fix all the little mistakes. I don't care about Disney coming in with the comic books and then fixing all the little things along the way. I care about this show itself, which for most viewers is going to be the only aspect of Loki that they see. Most people, spoiler alert, are not going to read the comic books. They're not going to do it, so don't bring them up. We're talking about the show. And while it's a really funny bit in the show, the jokes made about the Infinity Stones and how they actually mean nothing in the course of the universe actually kind of destroy everything that Marvel's about up to this point. I've talked about this before many times on my channel, and it's called the Shogun problem. And basically what it is you have a problem where in Shogun anime, you start here in terms of a power level. Let's take Naruto, for example. And they're fighting ninjas of the mist. And there's not too much going on, but it feels really intense. The show makes it intense, but the power level's not super high. It's about here. And then you fight someone else who's better and bigger and badder than them, and you're about here. And then you go to here, and then you go to here. And that's fine. You can keep raising the power level. That's the whole point of the show, is you're supposed to get to a point where you're fighting people who are the biggest and the baddest. The problem is, you start to look back at the power scale, and you can only go so high to the point where it's believable. Which is why when Naruto fights Sasuke, they really lean into the emotional aspect of it, because they're destroying so many things and it's such a big scale that you don't really care about what's going on. The power level is so far out there, it's so incomprehensible to us, that it doesn't even matter. It's not relevant anymore. Which is why when you have things like, let's say Dragon Ball Z, and they start throwing planets and stars at each other, no one gives a freak, because it's so far up there that why does it matter? Just kind of throw it all the wayside and just enjoy the emotional aspect. Or In shows where there is no emotional aspect, that's why people stop watching. And so the problem is when you begin to say, oh, well, the Infinity Stones aren't relevant anymore, you do have to realize that you basically negate everything that happens pre-Infinity Stones. And since that's the case, every single movie from Iron Man to Endgame no longer matters in context of the Marvel Universe. Because we have now just gotten to something that dwarfs, at an unbelievable scale, the rest of the Marvel Universe. And it doesn't matter. Everything for the past, 15 or so years, it doesn't matter. None of it mattered. None of it was important. None of it really affected anything when it comes to Loki. Loki itself controls basically everything that happened, and everything happens within the context of the timeline, which Loki is now involved with. And so I think that's going to be the problem moving forward with this show. I think that the problem that they're going to encounter is that if this is such a big thing and you need to keep escalating it, why does the first Iron Man movie even matter? It's basically a glorified dispute between two owners of a company. It's basically just a really glorified fight at Google. This is probably what happens at Google like almost every other day. Like really, the fight between Robert Downey Jr. and Jeff Bridges is probably what Elon Musk does every other Tuesday. So why is it that the fans should care about it? And here's the reality. The fans are no longer going to care about it. I recently went back and I watched the Avengers movie, and at the time, it was revolutionary. It was crazy. It was insane. Now, it's kind of lackluster, I'll be honest. I didn't enjoy it anywhere near as much when I rewatched it. And the reason for that is because all the films since then have made this film irrelevant. And it's really dwarfed the impact and the size and scope of what was going on. And so since that's the case, what you've done now is you have done what Avengers Endgame did to the original Avengers movie, but at a scale times a million. Like, you just made Thanos nothing. Like, nothing in this universe. He's nothing. He was the biggest thing the Avengers had ever fought, and Loki by himself is now involved in a force that is so big and so incomprehensible that Thanos himself doesn't matter. Like, who's Thanos? No one knows up there because he's not significant. And not to be cliche, but this has always been the end game of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The flame out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has always been that at some point, there's just no one big or bad enough for the Avengers or Loki or whoever, whichever character you're going to use. There's no one big or bad enough to face them. Or it's someone so big and bad that it doesn't make any sense that the Avengers or Loki or whoever it is that you use would even face them and get away with it. It doesn't make any sense. And so that's the problem. At the end of the day, Loki is basically the beginning of the end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not because it's bad, it's great, but where do you go? Like, how do you get any bigger than the Time Lords who control all time and everything that happens? You can't get bigger than that. And so since you can't get bigger than that, what else matters? Who cares? Now, getting back to it, I would recommend this show. 100% I would recommend that you watch it, and I think it's hilarious, and I think you'll enjoy it. And me, myself, so far, I'd probably give it an 8.5, 9, somewhere in that area out of 10. I think it's really good. I think you'll laugh. I think you'll enjoy it, particularly if you're a Marvel fan. I think you'll enjoy it if you're not a purist. And I think enjoy it for what it is. It's a hilarious bit of back and forth between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston. How bad could it really be? And once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and thanks for enjoying my content, leaving likes and subscribing. Let me know what it is that you want to see next. Let me know if there's any content that you want me to take a look at. Let me know if there's any problems that you see that I didn't identify in this video. Let me know what you thought of Loki. Let me know what the good is, what the bad is. Really, I just want to hear from you guys. Thanks so much, and y'all have a great rest of the day.